Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started since we have some introductions at the beginning. And I just want to say welcome everyone to this exciting webinar, College and University EV Charging, a conversation with leading institutions. And I'm going to serve as your host today, and I'm Julie Bond. I'm with the University of South Florida here in beautiful Tampa. I also am the program director for Best Workplaces for Commuters, and we are one of your hosts today. And today we have Terry is going to moderate. We have two panelists, Shelley and Dahlia, and you'll be getting introductions for them in just a minute. Okay, let's review today's agenda. And again, welcome everyone. We had a lot of great universities and businesses sign up for this, so we're excited to talk with you today and hear from you also. And again, I'm Julie Bond, and I'm serving as the host. In a minute, I'll introduce our moderator, Terry Travis. We'll have a really great program with discussions. We know we've received lots of questions from you when you signed up, but you can also type in questions in the chat or talk with us anytime. And then also at the end, we have Michael Ryer here with Fourth. He's going to give an overview of the EVAL program. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my university, University of South Florida. They are EVAL certified and they are certified at the silver level. So congrats to them and exciting to be in an EVAL certified location. And then I just want to talk a little bit about best workplaces for commuters. We are one of the hosts today. And we have been working on the EVAL program for almost 3 years now. So it's really been a great adventure. And I want to tell you just a little bit about our program before I turn the time over to Terry. We are Best Workplaces for Commuters. You can go to our website, bestworkplaces.org, and find out how you can become involved with us. We represent 827 different locations across the US and in Canada, representing about 2 million commuters. We do have 89 universities and colleges as part of our program. And this is a map showing you the locations in the United States and Canada. Florida right now is in the #1 position with the most members, followed by California, congrats to you, Virginia, and then North Carolina. So just coincidentally, we have speakers from California and North Carolina who are right there on the list. Okay. And so when our universities, colleges, and workplaces, they have to complete an application meeting our standard of excellence, which was established many years ago by US DOT and the EPA. And this just shows you some of the benefits that they offer to become a best workplaces for commuters. You can see in the orange are workplaces, and then in the kind of teal color are universities and colleges. And you can see the benefits they offer. So the university's transit passes and shuttles are some of the very top commuter benefits they offered. Telework is still right there at the top too. So we still have remote workers, followed by we have bicycle commuting, pre-tax benefits, van pool incentives. They have a lot of different really great benefits for commuters. And then also some of the top supporting benefits, we did add our electric vehicle charging as one of those benefits that helps them meet the standard of excellence. So we have about 60% of our businesses offering that benefit. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Terry Travis, who I've been very fortunate to work with on the EVAL program and really great to get to know him. So I have a short bio to let you get to know him a little better, and then I'll turn the time over to him for what you've all been waiting for, which is the discussion in the program. So Terry is the managing partner and co-founder of EVNoire, and it's an award-winning mobility technology group working at the intersection of electric, connected, shared, and autonomous vehicle technology. And Terry leads a team of diverse e-mobility professionals, and they include engineers, transportation professionals, mobility researchers, data analysis, urban planners, and many more. And they implement data-driven e-mobility strategies that accelerate the adoption of clean transportation and multimodal e-mobility solutions. So with that, Terry, I'm going to turn the time over to you for our program.
Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate being able to partner with you all on today's program and really excited about today's conversation. I think it'll be extremely helpful and insightful for the folks who are joining us today. One of the things that I wanted to do first is just to figure out like where folks are coming from. And so I'm going to put in the chat here. The ability, the things that we're looking for, like, your name, your title, your college, university, organization, and then geographically where you all are located. But we can start there because I think it'll be helpful as we round out and move forward with this conversation. But I'll tell you all a little bit about our organization, but to really begin to start this conversation, I think it's extremely timely. What we're seeing in the mobility ecosystem is critically important. We're seeing things that haven't, we haven't experienced before. It's coming in ebb and flows, but this last quarter we've seen a record number of EV sales that are happening before the tax credit expired. And I think this is a really timely conversation. But before we get into that, I'll tell you a little bit about EVNoire. You can go to the next slide, but we work on electric, connected, shared, and autonomous mobility solutions. And so we work with auto manufacturers, transit agencies, developers, utilities. We are doing a lot in the autonomous vehicle space, which most of those vehicles are electric, as well as looking at this through a multimodal lens. So everything from e-bikes and scooters all the way up to sustainable aviation. Next slide, please. Our roadmap of services is here. This orange box is the most important for today's conversation. Looking at charging networks and infrastructure, and having worked with a number of stakeholders across the country, we think that this is a really opportune time and opportunity to really move the needle forward. Next slide, please. Here are some of the folks that we've worked with over the past several years, and it ranges from rental car companies to auto manufacturers to government agencies, national labs, et cetera. But getting back to today's conversation, is before I get ready to introduce the panelists, I think I would say as we think about this topic, as we can see across the country, campuses are becoming living laboratories as we think about this clean mobility and transportation space. There are places where faculty, staff, and students are experiencing clean transportation firsthand. And then, electric vehicle adoption across modes is growing at an extremely rapid pace. And, as we think about these colleges, universities, community colleges, technical schools, it's not a question of how or how long it will be before we integrate EV charging. But, it's not the matter of if, but it's just a matter of when at this point. And, as we think about this, there are, departments that, facilities, sustainability, parking, HR that are all having these conversations. And I think it's critically important. And in today's program, we'll explore real world strategies, partnerships, policies, some of the innovation that's happening, that really moves this equitable and sustainable campus mobility forward. And so at this point, I'm going to introduce Dahlia, who is from the University of California at Davis, to talk about what Davis is doing. They've been a long time leader in the space in higher education, but not just there, but just overall. When you think about transportation and mobility in academia, UC Davis and the folks over there come to top of mind, top of that list. So, Dahlia, turning it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you for having us on. I'm Dahlia Garris. I am the program manager of the Electric Vehicle Research Center at UC Davis, and I think we can jump to the next slide. The EV Research Center has been around since 2007. We were actually started by the California Energy Commission as the sort of state's experts on how the state can set themselves up to be leaders in the electrification space. We actually started as the Plug-in Hybrid Electric Vehicle Research Center for many, many years with a Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Research Center, but that was a mouthful to say. And so we've simplified, but we do study electrification across the board. And our research is really focused on adoption, utilization, and impact of electrification and is done in a really multidisciplinary way. As a little bit of background about myself, rather than having you read a bio, I started as a student working on building prototype plug-in hybrid vehicles. This is my team here at the bottom. And in front of the nation's capital with a plug-in hybrid Suburban that we built starting in 2000. My master's degree, I studied electric school buses and their implementation at Napa Valley School District. I worked for a couple of years at Southern California Edison, the big utility down in Southern California. And then in 2007, moved back up to UC Davis to manage our EV Research Center and have come full circle. I'm now advising the student team that is building plug-in or electric vehicles for the same AVTC challenge as students now. Go ahead, next slide, please. So a little bit high level about UC Davis and our sustainability I guess, goals and programs. We are a very bike-friendly campus. We saw bike parking as an attribute on one of the previous slides. So we have tens of thousands of bikes on campus daily, I would say. We also have a student-run bus system called Unitrans, and that is actually our city bus system as well. We don't have a city-run system. We have our county-run bus that actually transports between Davis and our nearby big city, Sacramento, and the other county kind of locations. But the city buses are also our campus buses. We have campus-wide sustainability efforts guided by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're consistently in the top 10 in kind of nationwide and world rankings for sort of green schools. And the bottom photo here shows one of our 2 net zero energy housing communities that are built here on campus. Next slide, please. So to focus a bit more on our EV charging, most of the campus's programs are focused on actually incentivizing and encouraging biking to school, carpooling, and public transportation like our Unitrans. That said, we do have quite a few chargers on campus. I think I did a count recently, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 on our main campus. That doesn't include our Sacramento Medical Center campus. Drivers pay by an app on a daily basis for parking, and if you pick a EV parking spot or a parking spot with EV charging access, there's an extra fee for those parking spots, and that's $2.50 extra per day. But you're supposed to move your vehicle after four hours. So it ends up being about 62.5 cents per hour. Either way you cut it, whether you're charging at 3 kilowatts or 6 kilowatts in your particular vehicle, that's cheaper per kilowatt hour than what you would pay directly to PG&E, our local utility, for if you were charging at home. We started with ChargePoint and Clipper Creek. We now have mostly Enphase chargers. They're what we call dumb chargers. They're not smart, they're not networked, and we save quite a bit of money by not having these like monthly back-end fees to manage the charging and just having this flat rate parking based expense for access to EV charging. So the pro there is that, of course, it is less expensive to run these sort of dumb chargers, but the downside is that it's less accurate in terms of paying per kilowatt hour that each vehicle is using, of course. And then in terms of the kind of maintenance and installation, we do have a pair of experts on campus that are the guys that get sent out anytime a charger is reported as being not functional. They do diagnosis, repair, replacements. Installations are all done house. Those are part of our campus facilities teams. And I mentioned here we have something like 14,000 staff on campus and 40,000 students. Some of those are on our medical center in Sacramento. I did a little bit of quick checks on one of our previous reports this morning, and I was looking, and something like 25% of our students actually live on campus, and 63% of students live in Davis, with the remaining 11% living outside of Davis. The faculty situation's a little bit different. We have something like 40% that live in Davis and 60% live outside of Davis. Now, the really important piece there is actually that if you live in Davis, your average commute is something like 2 miles to work. That's the average. And if you live outside of Davis, your average commute is more like 24 miles. So I wanted to talk a little bit big picture of actually about the role that campuses can play in electrification, not necessarily in just by having chargers. So we have a campus fleet of vehicles that people can rent for a daily or monthly for a department, or even an hourly basis. So we have 3 options on campus. We did a program with BMW a few years ago, putting used electric i3s into the campus fleet. And then we surveyed people who used any vehicle in the campus fleet during a period, like a 1-year period. This is a kind of key result from that, which was that there's actually something like 50% of people who rented a BEV or a PHEV through the campus fleet had never had the opportunity to drive a BEV or a PHEV before. This is a couple years old. This research was done in 2020, but I think it speaks to the opportunity that campuses have in providing people this sort of option to have the low pressure experience of driving an electric vehicle. The other thing that we asked is whether or not it influenced their attitude or their perception of electric vehicles. And you can see from this bottom slide here that like 80% of PHEV drivers, their sort of perception of PHEVs became more favorable after having the opportunity to drive them through the fleet program. BEVs, it was about 70%. And we did ask if it made them less favorable, and nobody who rented a PHEV or BEV actually became less favorable toward them after having the experience of driving in one. Next slide, please. So the sort of key takeaways from that study were really that experience with EVs is generally positive. The driver experience in terms of the drive feel was the highest rated for BEVs compared to any other powertrain type. What made people more interested in re-renting the vehicles would have been longer range. Again, these were i3s. They had about 120-mile range, I think. But the i3 was still the most preferred vehicle in our fleet. To be fair, it was a BMW. We do not have other BMWs in our fleet. And then, like I said, it gave people the opportunity to drive a vehicle in a low pressure environment, essentially for free through their work. And then it led to them having discussions about BEVs or PHEVs with colleagues, family members, or friends. So it could promote word of mouth awareness and interest in electric vehicles. Next slide, please. And the next. So the role of campus charging, specifically, I wanted to mention, I don't believe, and we don't believe as a research center, that the campus charging should be considered a benefit or a retention for staff or employees. It is that, but that's not the key role that campus charging plays. The key role is that it provides access at work or school so that buyers that live, especially that live in multi-unit dwellings or rental properties, can make the transition to electric vehicles. it gives them that second best option to having overnight or home-based charging. This is what our research has found is the kind of the uh, key factor for retention of kind of staying with a battery electric vehicle is having home charging, and workplace charging is the next most used charging option. Level 2 public might be third best, and then finally that DC fast charging is the sort of niche. Kind of the thing that allows for long distance trips, but pushing people who may be lower income or live in apartments or rentals to depend on DC fast charging pushes them to the most expensive most expensive charging options and the least convenient. So we see workplace charging or campus charging in our case as really being an equalizing factor for a large percent of our commuters who are coming from rental situations at home where they don't have the ability or control to put in home-based charging. So I think that's it for me. Thanks so much for having me and look forward to answering questions. I'll try to type into the chat where I can.
Thank you, Dahlia. So now we're going to turn it over to Shelley from North Carolina State.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be a speaker here. Christine, if you'll head to the next slide. So I am part of the NC Clean Energy Technology Center. Much like UC Davis, we focus more on education and outreach than we do on actual transportation planning for the university. That's a different department. And some of the slides that I'll be showing today, you'll note that they are designed or either the information came from someone else. And I know at least one of those people has signed on today. So thank you for joining us there. Next. So the Clean Energy Technology Center is based in North Carolina. We are part of the College of Engineering. We've been around for over 35 years. We were originally started as the Solar House, and so we have a lot of programming that's focused on that, but we do have a clean transportation team. Our focus as a center is to advance sustainable energy and the economy associated with that through education and demonstration projects. Next. And we have multiple teams, although we are a smaller organization. The Clean Transportation team is made up of 4 individuals, and I'm glad to be a senior project manager there. We also have Energy Policy, who develops the 50 states of EVs as just one of their quarterly and annual documents that they put out that covers policy and legislation proposed and passed from all 50 states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico. And they also manage the Desire database. If anyone in your organization uses that, that is what our policy team does. We have clean energy training. Right now, the majority of that is focused on solar energy installation and hands-on training there. We do have, in terms of clean transportation, some on-demand EV charging supply equipment sessions, and I'll put the link in for that before I finish up today. And then in the spring, we'll also be hosting some in-person hands-on training for level 2 residential installation. And then we have our clean power and industrial efficiency team. They do a lot of technical assistance and fee-for-service assessments, and then renewable energy. Next. So clean transportation team, I mentioned we are a small but mighty group. We focus on technical assistance as well, including trainings. We do fleet assessments. We put on the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference and Expo, which is the last week of every August. So I hope that you will join us in North Carolina for that. And we do education and outreach initiatives. So everything from webinars like this to ones that we produce in conjunction with NAFA. If your fleet managers aren't participating in programming that we're doing, I hope that you will pass along my information or some of the other training that we do. We work a lot with facilities as well. Next. And Like I said, I am not part of the North Carolina State University Transportation Department. My background started with Chambers of Commerce, working with B2B there and executive education. I went on to go Triangle and stayed there for 15 years and became the Regional Transportation Demand Management Program Manager. That's how I know Julie, very familiar with BWCs, and glad to see that we're sticking around as number 5 in the nation for the state of North Carolina. Established a Go Perks commute rewards program that focused on local small businesses for the incentives, and Golden Modes Awards ceremony that recognized employers and outstanding commuters. So one form of sustainable transportation moved over to a different one. And that's how I came to NC State University. Again, the installation training for architects and planners on electric vehicle supply equipment. We'll be releasing the next series in the spring. So if you are working on anything with residential housing, universities will be a portion of the residential housing that we're looking for. So we'd love to include you as a case study and get your information or answer the questions that you have for that. We participate in the Drive Electric USA case studies. I developed about a dozen of those for the state of North Carolina. And then the webinars that I mentioned, and then also I'm the lead on the Appalachian Clean Energy Summit Transportation Work Group, which is at Appalachian State University each June. So again, that's focused on colleges and universities. If you're not familiar with the Clean Energy Summit, I hope you'll look that up as well. Next. So I focus again on education, not on implementation. I will go as quickly as possible as I can to make sure that we have opportunities for Q&A and discussion today. The organizations that I really want to highlight today are North Carolina State University, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina, University of North Carolina, which is in Chapel Hill, and then Wake Technical Community College, which is Wake County, with offices or campuses, excuse me, in Raleigh and closer to Durham as well. And Catawba College is a small study. I won't go into them on detail, but they have introduced a new electric shuttle system just in August, and they're in the pilot phases of that. So North Carolina State University, Andrea Neary is on today. He is the program manager for this. He is housed over at the Department of Transportation. So thank you for signing in. Maybe he can answer some questions if Dahlia or I can't. They have level 2 charging in place. Level 3 was cost prohibitive, and as Dahlia showed in her pyramid, typically not something that is needed. Off-campus housing is the number 1 place for employees to charge. A lot of what they do is focused for all of the organizations that I'm going to talk about. They're focused on surveying their employees and their students to get the information that they need. So at NCSU, off-campus students have an average one-way trip of 9.7 miles, employees 18.1 miles. What was really important to them is the electrical site plan that's in place. Make sure that you build the right team and aren't working simply from assumptions. And then one way that you can save money and control your electrical bills is to do load shedding, which you can do when you have multiple cars all plugged in at once across your chargers. NC State decided not to do that, even though it would have reduced panel upgrades. They wanted to make sure that there was reliability in the services that they offered in terms of the amount of time that it takes to charge a vehicle. Important, again, is that it's not cost prohibitive, but it's incentivized to leave after you charge. So open to the public at a different rate, and then looking at the fees associated with it. Want to make sure that their ROI included operations, maintenance, and the ability to expand the number of chargers available. Next. And again, credit to Andrea here. The process for considering EV installation included 9 different steps. I won't read them to you. I'll give you a moment to look through them. And then also just say not listed on this is after you have your EV charging stations in place, it is important that you are communicating this information out to your community. If people don't know that it's there, then they cannot use the infrastructure. They don't know necessarily where to go look for the information. Depending on the university, who's in charge of installation, who's in charge of apps or permits can change a lot. And then people are confused. They get frustrated depending on the size of your campus or the location. It can be something that makes it prohibitive for them to access the stations. Next. So NC State University's program, 18 level 2 charging stations with 2 ports each. They do use ChargePoint, and then they have a 2-tier fee structure for NCSU affiliates with a parking permits. They're called affiliates. It's students, faculty, staff, and then we also have a research campus called Centennial Campus. And there it may be private companies, but they are also using or required to use the parking permits. And those are why it's affiliates. And then the general public has $2.50 per hour. After you've charged a maximum of 4 hours, you do have that overtime fee of $10 per hour. So get your charge, move your vehicle. Otherwise, you'll just help with the expansion on increasing that ROI. And then again, the siting considerations, making sure that you actually have the electrical in place or access to it, or that it meets your timeline if you're working with your power provider. And they looked at some EV charging deserts around campus, looked at the impacts and interactions with existing parking, and then cost-based again on the existing electrical capacity there. Next. Then with UNC Chapel Hill, one of the state's flagship universities, you may be familiar. We say UNC Chapel Hill, that is the main campus. There are many UNCs across the state. The background, they have 30% of their off-campus students commute with single occupancy vehicles. 60% of the employees are in SOVs or in carpooling, so they're bringing a vehicle to campus. They have seen a decrease in daily parking with hybrid schedules post-pandemic. So again, information that they're getting from surveying their students, faculty, and staff, and not just working from assumptions of the demand that they might need. And the responsibility for parking is distributed across the departments. So it can make it more difficult to manage or to expand the programming there. Originally, they did not have someone in place to manage the EV parking. It was also distributed, and what they ended up doing was handing it over to the Transportation Demand Management staff person, Landon. So thanks, Landon, for providing this information to me. And he became the single source of information there. They also used the marketing on their commuter programming website. And then for permitting and pricing, they had a model that was parking space permit plus an EV charging permit. It became very confusing. Now they've just gone with a flat fee for an EV permit that includes your parking, and that's more than tripled the use of it. Their rate is $1.25 per hour for visitor parking, and they are open to the public for use as long as it's an open parking deck. So again, the distributed parking makes it difficult for funding and expansion. Their other challenge is third-party maintenance. So they don't have maintenance on their staff, and neither does their EV installation and software program. And they have gone from cloud-based chargers and reduced their prices by going and reducing the software expenses there. Next. So again, this is a map of their campus. I've highlighted Rams Head parking deck there. All of theirs are in parking decks. The conduit was already available. So while it's more expensive to have EV charging added to a parking deck, if you don't have that conduit in place, they did have the opportunity to do that. 10 chargers with 20 ports, and then they have seen 105 unique vehicles charged across those 20 ports. And you can see the link there for getting more information on their EV programming. Next. And then Wake Technical Community College, they are the largest college in the state of North Carolina because they offer both degree and non-degree programs. Overall, you're looking at almost 70,000. 76% of their students are driving alone to campus, or students, faculty, and staff are driving alone to campus. They do not have a parking fee. They want it to be something that is not prohibitive. You do need to get a permit, but there is no dollar amount associated with getting and registering for your permit. They have 11 campuses, and I'll show a map of that in just a moment. They have over 10,000 parking spaces across those campuses. Surface lots, $4,000 to $5,000 per space, and then around $25,000 per space for a parking deck in North Carolina in our region. So they focus on low emitting vehicles. It's managed through their sustainability and facilities programming, as is their TDM programming. And low emitting vehicles can be fuel efficient hybrids, or it could be EV parking. They have the information on their websites and a form to help lead you through the process to determine whether or not your vehicle qualifies for that. They do have preferred parking, or as they put it, premier parking, that is encouraged for carpooling and for LEVs. And 2% of those premier spaces are for electric vehicle supply equipment or charging spaces. And charging is free. They do have the public that will come and sneak on campus to try and charge their vehicles there, but they have decided to opt for that happening occasionally rather than charge. They are also a big proponent of workforce training on electric vehicle supply equipment and maintenance and technology. Next. So these are their 11 different campuses. They have 44 ports across those locations. Along with that, since it is part of their sustainability, engineering, and facilities groups, they have everything from permeable surfaces along to some solar and battery energy storage. Next. And then they have created their design guidelines for electric vehicle parking. So you can see it in the programming that they do here. John Majernik is the individual who helped me with this, and he presented a much longer presentation for the Appalachian Energy Summit that I spoke to. So their goal is making sure that new buildings are future ready, that they are using their parking decks and making sure that they have conduit in them. And then they are also focusing on integrating the ADA space, one for every 25 electric vehicle charging spaces. There is not currently rules from the federal government on ADA requirements for EV charging. There are best practices for that. And one of those EV supply equipment training sessions that I mentioned earlier, we have one that is dedicated solely to that if you're interested in learning more. Next. And again, the electric vehicle supply equipment program, we have 4 different courses: the basics of siting, the full presentation from Andrea is included there, along with other case studies throughout the different programs. So working with your utilities, very important. Navigating permitting for EVSE charging, that changes across the nation. And from city to city, you may not even have permitting in place. Maybe your university does. Maybe it conflicts or supports what's happening in your government. Maybe it's not there at all. And then EV charging ecosystems and accessibility, the one that I was referring to, that we don't currently have U.S. Access Board final rulemaking in place there. Next. And there is my contact information. I spoke to everyone that was highlighted in my programming, and they are willing to be contacted. So if you want follow-up information, you can contact me. I'll try and do an e-intro. Unless you are an EVSE salesperson, then I'll probably hold back a little bit, to be quite honest with you, because we want to make sure that we are helping the universities involve and evolve in their programming. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Shelly and Dahlia. So now at this point, we're going to start a Q&A because there's some, the chat was really ringing with a number of questions that were coming in and some really good ones actually. And then there were some questions that were submitted during registration that we want to go over as well. And I'll kind of start with, one of the first questions is, I think at a high level, I think what's most important for universities that are thinking about deployment of, charging infrastructure for faculty, staff, and then obviously student fleets and all the above, what are some of the lessons learned that UC Davis and the North Carolina institutions learned when deploying EV charging for universities? I think that's a great place to start. And at this point in time, for those folks who, we want this to be interactive. So, we can turn on your cameras and, we're going to hopefully open this up to be able to make it more interactive and more dialogue based as opposed to being academic, even though we're talking about universities and colleges. But Dahlia, Shelley, can you all speak to that?
Yeah, I guess I can get started unless Shelly has something she's
Go ahead.
dying to share. So I don't manage the installation or parking for campus installation of chargers, but I do think that the campus has gone through a learning process and has realized that we're seeing really high utilization of our chargers and that it is um, become sort of an expectation that people have charging access when they travel to campus. Um, so I think they've tried a few different approaches to charging and have decided to stick with the sort of dumb charging and parking by, paying for parking by the day. That was a transition that we made something like 3 or 4 years ago. And so having this like add-on fee if you wanted EV access to charging seemed like the lowest cost way to deploy chargers and have the pricing kind of stay reasonable.
So where you speak to that, Dahlia, we have folks in all different parts of the country and all different levels of understanding. When you say dumb chargers, can you define or can you expound on what that means for folks who may not understand and may not be as well versed on that one?
Right, yeah. So they're not networked. There's no identification of what vehicle or user is plugging into the charger. Um, they don't require any sort of login or access to turn on the charger. You just plug in your vehicle. But that does mean that they're not tracking like kilowatt hours per vehicle. They're not even tracking time. So I was actually really happy to see that Shelley's school had this like what the wait time, right? If the vehicle's done charging and it's no longer in use, that there is a fee for sort of hogging that charging spot while not in use. And that's something that we see for public charging and DC fast charging as being really important to making sure that those spaces are being cycled through and you increase utilization. Davis doesn't have that. It relies on human parking enforcement.
Mhm. Sure,
So,
sure.
sorry, you ask about the challenges. So one would be making sure that you have the right team in place. I think that's a huge learning curve for programs as they look to implement EV charging for the very first time. So facilities, have an engineer on your team, have someone from procurement on your team. Treat it like any other project that's out there that's going to be across departments, including construction in it. And then also reach out to your local power provider. They may also have funding sources in there. I know those were some of the questions that we got during the registration process, so I'm sure they'll come up again. But again, going back to after everything was in place, just making sure that people know that it is there. And then in the planning process, don't assume that it's necessarily going to be a huge investment, that you're going to be spending millions, because as Dahlia covered, and as Andrea covered, DC fast charging is probably not appropriate for your campus, or for your workplace. And so the majority does happen at home. For those that don't have charging at home as an option, workplace is a great place for that to happen. And it is an equalizer. Transportation is the number 2 cost for us in North Carolina after housing. So making sure that you have that option in place to help decrease those transportation costs overall, it's going to be really important to you consider that as well. And that goes to another question we've got, Terry, during registration, which is, how do you justify this? What's the opportunity cost on this? And part of it is going to be making sure that you have these available to everyone to help reduce some of those cost of living programs.
Yeah, that leads to one of the questions that, whether it's workplace, colleges, universities, one of the big questions that we've received, particularly from folks who are entering into this space, there is a question between level 2 and level 3 chargers, right? I can't tell you how many meetings we've been in where folks are like, we want level 3 chargers, and they don't know the different cost correlation. So, can either of you speak to that? So, for folks who are embarking on this in a new space or in a new way, it may be helpful for them.
So I'm a little old fashioned here. I do have some notes in place. So one, I will say DC fast chargers, it's only in the past 2 years or so that I heard people starting to revert to the concept of level 2 is just fine. If you are not trying to charge along the freeway, level 2 is just fine. We've seen that mentality change and it become much more acceptable and expected. And then additionally, learning what those costs were, learning what funding is available out there, and then also learning what the electrical requirements would be to do DC fast charging versus a level 2 charger. And that also comes down to, I think, how some of the universities have looked at their return on investment as well, or justifying putting these in place, is the construction costs for that, the panel upgrades that are required, the retrofits that are required, and the ability to serve as many people as possible through level 2 because of the decreased expense. The charging on campus for the return on investment, that can be calculated with some assistance from your utility company as well. And then Dahlia, you referred to the dumb chargers versus the smart chargers. For those who don't know, um, the the software for having smart chargers, the logins for that, the data analytics for that, if it's being provided by the company, that can be quite an expense. And you should consider that in determining what your full cost is going to be and which direction you're going to go with on those pieces and components.
Great. Dala, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we transition to Michael?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think I saw a question about signage, and I'll put in the chat a photo that we have that's a compilation, but there is no standard for signage yet. So you'll see all sorts of different signs, and I don't know if it's worth a survey of what's the most common in your region locally, but I mean, regarding signage, it's sort of a free for all right now, which is unfortunate. They should be consistent and recognizable and in line with what people expect to see or look for when they're looking for charging.
And that also extends to accessible EV charging. There is, again, no uniformity requirement there.
Yep. I just put in a chat a quick pro tip. Anybody, any university that is really looking to deploy EV charging at any scale, reach out to your utility provider as quickly as possible, because that is one of the bottlenecks. But We're going to continue to answer any questions that are submitted via the chat. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Michael from Fourth to talk about the EVAL program. Michael, turning it over to you.
Thanks so much, Terry. Hey, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Michael Ryer. I'm a senior program associate on the access to charging team over at Fourth. And today I'll be talking about a program that was launched in October of 2023 called the Electric Vehicle Adoption Leadership Certification, or EVAL for short. Thank you so much. And then actually, next slide, please. Thank you. So basically, what is EVAL? The Electric Vehicle Adoption Leadership, or EVAL program, is a clean commuting program designed to help reduce emissions pollution from employee commutes. EVAL provides technical assistance to organizations that want to start or bolster the workplace charging programs, and it also gives national recognition to organizations that already have workplace charging programs. Our certification, the EVAL certification, indicates the availability of clean transportation options and opportunities for staff at a workplace. So, the LEED certification essentially, it indicates that a building's infrastructure is more environmentally conscious and sustainable. EVAL represents workplace charging for workplaces, the same way that LEED represents infrastructure for buildings. So there are 4 tiers to the certification that are based on the amount of points an organization receives from filling out our application. These are, as you can see here, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. The point allocations are up there above. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why certify? By certifying, your organization gains valuable recognition from EVAL and our partners. It also grants access to a collaborative community of nearly 450 sustainability leaders. Other EVAL certified organizations include University of Southern Florida, Harvard University, Nike, Genentech, City of Phoenix, Hawaiian Electric, and many other businesses around the United States with groundbreaking workplace charging programs. It also gives you additional access to a community that can help you identify and overcome hurdles that you might encounter while building out your workplace charging programs. Also, our marketing and spotlight publications are shared on social media to spread awareness and recognition of your workplace charging success. Next slide, please. Regarding eligibility, organizations of all sizes from all industries, including community-based organizations and nonprofits, are eligible. The only non-eligible organizations are home offices and organizations that provide charging for fleet vehicles exclusively. These 2 options are not eligible to apply. And next slide, please. Here's a quick list of colleges and universities that have applied for and received the EVAL certification, and a breakdown of their tier listings and data specifications is on the next slide, please. Here we go. So you can see the color-coded allocation of where points tend to land when organizations and universities take the certification. Most workplace charging investments that we've seen in this program typically fall into the $30,000 to $360,000 range. That's how much they spent on installing these. Of course, there are outliers, and each case is unique. And our certification is still working on assessment metrics that can meet both large and small business capabilities. Most workplace charging is organizationally owned, and some, like a thinner slice, are owned and maintained by a third party. Most campuses, like has been referenced to answers and questions in the chat, have over 1,000 parking spots and tend to have a ratio of 6 level 2 chargers per major lot, every major lot being 400 to 600 parking spots at the least. Regarding ROI, because I figured that this would come up at some point, several case studies indicate that EVSE can pay for itself within 2 years of deployment, and it regularly attracts high-income EV owners to parking spaces. On a college campus, this would look like local EV owners that might not have any affiliation to the university, parking and charging on campus while grabbing coffee, or visiting a store to buy campus merchandise, or visiting a library. Either way, that puts ambient data into university systems that show higher visitation rates, which ultimately kind of goes up the ladder in my mind and signals that university facilities are being used better. And this also puts universities on charging maps like PlugShare or ChargePoint. That's more visibility and passive ROI. Additionally, a company that I worked for through 2020 to the present, they deployed a charger at Hawaii Community College in Hilo, Hawaii, and saw through traffic increase by about 300% within its first 2 months of deployment. And that was in a small parking lot with no nearby coffee shops or grocery stores, but folks like to visit there because of the availability of clean charging. Next slide, please. Thank you. And just to kind of like break down the information barrier on what the certification process looks like, it was designed to be pretty straightforward and intuitive. It just involves kind of creating an account, registering your organization, giving us some information about you so we know which information would best serve you as you go through this process. And once the worksite data is submitted, you'll receive an invoice. Upon completion, applications will be reviewed by fourth staff. And at last, you'll get your certification and get recognized. Next slide, please. And we can go through these pretty quickly, but here is just a brief look at what the certification process looks like. We can actually go to the next slide as well. Thank you so much. This is what all the steps include. Basically, organizations that tend to score highly have policies in place that make it easier for staff and students alike to access workplace charging, or if they're doing trips in different states, they have an easier time accessing, let's say, electric Ubers. Next slide, please. So if you have any developed sustainability goals for your organization, these all go into adding more and more points next. And we can actually go through the next few slides pretty quickly. And then any questions you have regarding, definitions or your key terms, there are links to kind of clarify what those mean. Some yes or no answers clarify more questions. And if you do sign the Charge at Work pledge, which kind of gives you a run through of what your workplace charging investment might cost, that gets you additional points into workplace charging. And just a few more slides down. Thank you so much. I'm trying to make sure we stay within the time allocation. Here we go. And then there is an option for one application for multiple work sites. Let's say you have 7 or 11 different parking lots. That would be pretty overwhelming to fill out for one site. So you can just enter the data here. All it needs is your parking spaces per lot, how many level 1 charging ports are there, level 2, and if you have DC fast charging, those count for a lot of points as well. This gets the whole certification process down to just a few minutes as opposed to hours. Next slide, please. And here's more of what I was talking about. If you have a spreadsheet that has all the parking information, you can send that to us. We're more than happy to enter a lot of it in the site for you to save you time. And any questions you have or questions on eligibility, you can email to eval@fourthmobility.org. Next slide, please. And lastly, you'll press submit and then pay. Your answers will be saved upon completion of each section, so no sweat if it takes time to go back and forth between parking information, number of chargers, and etc. So lastly, we do provide a number of forms of technical assistance. We regularly host and attend webinars. We have a list of template surveys and forms that you can use to engage employee enthusiasm of who currently drives to work, who would love to benefit from more EV charging. We have a directory of local providers and installers. I was just at the Roadmap conference, and we had a number of providers of EV charging want to join our list so that any universities or businesses who want to incorporate workplace charging can be added to this list, and we can connect demand to supply. And of course, a program implementation guide and a list of best practices. Next slide, please. So here's an example of what some of the recognition looks like. We do mail physical copies of these certifications out, as well as provide digital templates for decals that can go on emails on your website to help you market yourself as an EVAL certified employer. You'll have access to the EVAL Roundtable Workgroup, which we're trying to get started up again soon, and discounts to the 4th Roadmap Conference. Next slide, please. So the certification is a base price of $600. There are stackable discounts. I'll leave this slide up for a hot moment so you can see the numbers. And then to note, this is a lifetime certification fee that will not require recertification at this time. Once you're certified, it's that way for years to come. And here are the discounts that I mentioned. These are stackable. And next slide, please. This is a look at our systematic auditing process procedure. And I mentioned charge at work. If you have anxiety over how much the entire workplace charging installation should take, this program is really, really good and it's free. It kind of gives you a timeline of how much it would cost, as well as what the initial investment would look like, and helps you gauge worker interest in electric vehicles. Next slide, please. So next, feel free to visit the EVAL certification webpage. Feel free to also sign the Charge at Work pledge and connect with us on social media. And next slide, please. I know I'm running out of time here. Here's a brief look at a lot of sustainability leaders that have joined in the first couple of years of the program being there. And last slide. Thank you so much. If you have any questions about the certification, I'm happy to answer them at this point. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Michael. So one of the things we wanted to do was, really talk about are there any questions about the EVAL program? If you all are familiar with LEED certification, it's a very similar program. EVAL is a very similar program, but for EV charging. I think that there's a huge opportunity upside with this. There have been some really good questions that have come through the chat as well. Hopefully, some of the folks can get to answering some of those questions. But are there any questions for Michael? Okay, Nancy says she wants to connect with you. Michael, can you drop your email into the chat? Thank you. Yeah,
Yes,
there
sir.
you go. And then one of the things that I'll close out with is the data shows that places that have EV charging, their staff and employees are 6 times more likely to purchase an EV if they have access to EV charging. So it's critically important as we begin to think about this, that as we think about deployment of electric vehicle charging, as well as expanding the scope, if we look at last quarter, we saw a record number of sales of electric vehicles before the federal tax credit expired. But that means that there are more vehicles on the road. In addition to that, there are more vehicles that will hit the secondary market in the next couple of years. All of that being said, as we think about this from just a common sense vantage point, there are more electric vehicles coming coming to U.S. roads across modes and across classes. And it's going to be imperative that colleges, universities, trade and technical schools, and all of the above begin to address the needs of their staff, their fleets, and as well as students. I'm going to turn it back over to Julie to close it out for us.
Terry, can I just mention real quick while Julie comes online? So one of the questions I think that came in the registration process was about the impact of those charging and the EV purchase incentives that we lost at the federal level, and we will see an impact on our market from the loss of those incentives. But I think what's important to keep in mind is that the automakers operate on a global scale. They're looking at the global market, and the global market is not slowing down on electrification. So while automakers may sort of delay production or reduce production, their EVs are not going to go away. And we will continue to see an increase in the percent of EVs on the on-road fleet.
For sure. Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you, everyone. I wanted to thank Terry, Shelley, and Dahlia. I guess my camera. Oh, sorry. There we go. So I just want to thank everyone for today's webinar. And I also wanted to, Christine, if you wanted to turn your camera on, I just want to recognize you that you were the one behind the scenes helping with everyone and setting this up. So thank you so much, Christine. I just wanted to recognize you for everything you did. Also, we have a evaluation that we're asking everyone to take. So we'd appreciate that if you would take the evaluation, and if you have some topics you'd like to see or anything helpful you'd like to let us know. So again, I think this was a really great webinar. It was recorded, so you'll receive the slides and the recording. We've had some people asking us that, and yes, you'll receive all of the information. And again, thank you to our speakers. Terry, that was really great with the Q&A. Also, Michael, thank you so much for the overview of EVAL. And with that, I will close out the webinar, and let us know if you need anything. You have our contact information and emails. So thank you all very much.
Thanks so much for having us.